Hello, this is the RPG Crawler, and welcome to another Shelf of Many Things, where I take a look at independent and small press tabletop role-playing games and accessories. Now, I usually prefer to keep my RPG system separate from the settings, except for a few rules tweaks here and there. But I understand that every so often, you get a setting that's unique enough that it either requires or is greatly enhanced by its own system. Rebirth Roleplaying Game by Michael Hansen is one such game, containing both a unique setting that departs radically from the classical fantasy tropes and a unique system designed to cover the various aspects unique to that setting. The developers were kind enough to send me the print version for this review, which can be purchased through Amazon, but it is also available as a PDF through the Drive-Thru RPG series of sites. Being a combination of setting and role-playing game system, there will be a few sections to this review. We'll start with the physical build of the book itself. It's a black and white, perfect bound paperback volume with around 140 pages. Interior layout is mostly double column, with the occasional full-width introductory blurb at the start of each chapter, and full-width tables scattered throughout. Interior artwork, where it exists, consists of regular panels of black and white illustrations of the topic at hand, directly in line with the rest of the content of the book. It's nice and readable all in all, if a little bit invariant in terms of layout when you're flipping through for a particular heading. In terms of mechanical editing, there were only one or two major typos that stood out to me, and the meaning was obvious enough from them that it made little difference. But in terms of content editing and organization, I'm going to have to get back with you on that towards the end of the review. The book layout begins with an introduction, and a chapter on the lore of Creo and the nations that remain within it. This is followed not by a character creation section as is usual for RPGs, but by a list of the basic rules of the game, which kind of jump all over the place, but they do get a decent skeleton of the rules in place right up front. The next chapter covers the attribute tree, which I'll go into detail when discussing the actual rule structure itself. Then there's chapters on the skills, detailing each skill in turn. The chapter thereafter discusses the professions and the profession trees, followed by general gifts. Gifts in this game are functionally what feats are to certain other systems. The equipment chapter covers equipment in a very general way, since individual weapons and armor aren't necessarily designated by exact name, but rather by qualities, which again I'll get into more deeply in the rules discussion. Finally, there are chapters on the legendary artifacts present in the game, or the unique magic items per se. Then there's general utility items, and finally there's a section with a couple divine creatures. The last is not so much a bestiary per se, because most of the encounters in this game are assumed to be with other reborn, but it does detail 3 very powerful divine creatures, pretty similar to angels, that were remnants of the prior religion, which may still be encountered wandering the land. In terms of the setting, the basic premise of Rebirth Role-Playing Game is that a few hundred years in the past, the lands of Creo had been united under a central church of Elus. Over time, that church grew more and more corrupt, until eventually 7 nameless beings gathered to summon a demon and overthrow said church. The demon was summoned, and much death resulted. Then the 7 destroyed the demon, and each took a fragment of the demon's body unto themselves. These body parts granted each of the 7 a unique power, and allowed them to revive the fallen into undying humans, the reborn. They then each carved out their own nation out of the remnants of Creo. As the game begins, the southern chaotic nations are making war on the northern lawful nations, although in truth, all of the nations have their own dark twist thanks to the particular demonic quality that their necromantic leader absorbed. Players take the roles of the reborn from whatever nations around the entire area, and each nation affects what classes can be chosen. All the while, there's a peripheral remnant of the prior human inhabitants still scraping out existence here and there, mostly off of the main island. It's a setup that's ripe for the sort of morally gray type of storyline that encourage backdealing and even intra-party scheming, as it's entirely possible to have a group of Reborn that are from different nations working together, either against a common enemy or to keep an eye on one another and those who technically would be allies. This has an impact on the game as a whole, because the vast majority of foes, as I said, will be other Reborn, and most of the rules reflect just being focused on facing characters similar to those that the players actually play. The fact that each of the Reborn is infused with necromantic energies means that the bone shards that you retrieve from them replace the usual coinage-based economics found in other games. Furthermore, the fact that these nations effectively exist in a twisted, post-civilization state means that salvage and crafting become a decent part of the game. Rather than finding magical items laying around, although a few do exist, most of the exceptional gear will be crafted using either materials gathered or salvaged, with a certain amount of bone shards added for energy. This offers a high degree of customization of gear within the system. In terms of rules, the game uses a D100 style system in which a general chance of success in percentile terms is decided via a combination of attributes, skills, and mitigating factors. At first, the formula which are used to determine success can seem a little bit involved, but in truth, much of it can be calculated before gameplay even begins, allowing for very swift use in actual play. Although there are professions which function as classes, these are not limited in terms of what skills that they can pick up, and thus advancement isn't as heavily weighted towards a character's class as it might be in another game. In terms of attributes, there are 3 groups of 3, so 9 in all. Body, mind, and spirit each individually have a power, an intuition, and an endurance attribute. So for body, you have strength, dexterity, and constitution, while mind has will, wit, and wisdom. Spirit rounds out the list with charisma, attunement, and tenacity. Each character has a primary and a secondary group, with the primary group contributing its 3 attributes to the character's base saves, and then each lesser group becoming increasingly lower in terms of starting points. These 9 attributes may individually affect skills, and a few affect a character's basic elements, such as constitution determining overall health. Skills are divided amongst the 3 main attribute categories and may vary wildly. They cover the usual skills that you'd see in any game, such as climb, sleight of hand, intimidate, etc., but they also cover a variety of basic rules skills, such as grapple or endure, which every character may have use of at some point. There's also a number of crafting skills, from basic craft to engineering, allowing for the creation not only of basic arms and armor, but also minor enchanted versions, and even mechanical walkers that can serve as guards and workers. Chemistry may allow the creation of various tinctures and drugs, and so forth. In terms of classes, each one shares an overall advancement table where earned experience goes towards a level up to a maximum level of 20, and all characters get a few skill points per level. Some levels also grant general gifts, and certain levels grant extra events, which I'll get to in a moment when I discuss combat. Each character hails from a particular nation, and each nation has a selection of just 2 base professions. After level 10, a character then selects from one of 2 additional specialized professions unique to each base profession, for a grand total of 21 total professions. Each profession has a certain list of abilities, which a character may gain at a certain level, as well as profession-specific gifts that alter how that profession's skills operate. As I said before, none of the professions are really limited in terms of what basic skills they can take, allowing for a wide variety of character types in a particular profession, but undoubtedly some professions' basic abilities are much more class-defining than others. For instance, while a politician in one of its advanced classes may simply get speeches that buff their party or harm their enemies, the Mortician advanced class can actually start raising other undead monstrosities to serve them. As far as combat goes, combat uses an event economy, in which each character gains a certain number of events that they can use, ranging from 3 at level 1 to 5 at level 20. Each action taken takes a certain number of events, although using all of the events a character has available in a particular round may result in minor defensive penalties, as the character has effectively devoted all of their energies to offense or movement. I actually kind of like this system, and I can see where it has its benefits compared to other systems that I'm used to. Finally, I'll mention equipment. As I said before, equipment, such as weapons and armor, aren't individually defined. Rather, you select the equipment's general size, type, and material. For instance, you could have an iron, medium slashing weapon as some sort of sword, or axe, or whatever, or a large, bone, two-handed piercing weapon as some sort of spear. Mechanically, the combinations are defined and just left to the player to sort out the flavor. This is another thing I rather like, since it does tend to provide a bit more variety in terms of descriptive looks. I think the system does have a lot going for it. I think that the setting is unique, although necessarily will force more preparation work on the GM. The artistry in the book is pretty solid, and does a good job illustrating the concepts and the beings described within in a manner that seems setting consistent. But I do have a problem with this RPG. It commits what I consider a cardinal sin of hiding rules in certain areas you don't expect. You don't have a chapter for character creation. Instead, character creation is spread out throughout the introductions of most of the other chapters. Likewise, although you do have basic frameworks for combat, specific rules, including rules core to the flow of combat for any character, are then hidden in the descriptions of other things. For instance, there's a sort of wound threshold beyond which a character may pass out. It's not mentioned in the combat section directly, but rather off in the endure skill section in the skills chapter. It's entirely possible that a character that didn't put any points in endure may not even realize that that rule exists. There are differences in the types of damage weapons can do, and indeed certain specific effects from using either slashing, piercing, or bludgeoning weapons exist, but again they're not mentioned in the combat section, but rather over in the equipment section. There's a couple other major rules instances that can take a while of flipping back and forth to tell where the particular rule is hidden, and neither the table of the contents nor the index are of any help. However, this is somewhat mitigated by the overall brevity of the rules and their consistency. As I stated, the entire book is only around 140 pages, and much of that is lore and tables, so it's entirely possible for a GM who really wants to use the rules to memorize them with a very quick but relatively thorough read-through. If you're used to the idea of either marking where certain relevant information is when it's somewhere you wouldn't expect, or making a quick resolution cheat sheet that will let you know what additional checks may be needed in any particular combat situation, then you can get around the organizational issues that this presents. I want to recommend Rebirth for people who want something different from the usual fantasy tropes, or who are looking for a dark fantasy-style system where more focus can be devoted to military or political maneuverings rather than the standard monster bashing. You will have to have a high tolerance for certain themes, and the organizational issues that are mentioned can put some people off. But if playing the role of an undying subject of a dark overlord who cannibalizes the fallen dead to craft new weapons and armor out of their bones appeals to you, then it may be worth taking a look. It's definitely got something going for it. And I'll leave it at that. This has been the RPG Crawler with Shelf of Many Things, a Rebirth role-playing game. I'll leave links in the description below as always. If you like what you've seen, remember to leave a like, comment if you've got any feedback, and subscribe for more RPG content, both tabletop and computer. If you're feeling particularly generous, I do have a Patreon at patreon.com/rpgcrawler that goes towards supporting this channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.